Hello, everyone. We here at Softcrylic hope everyone is staying safe and well during these times. My name is Brett Crawford, and I'm an analyst in the data science and analytics practice at Softcrylic. I'm here with Andrew John, a senior consultant in our data activation practice.
Hey, everyone. So thanks for the intro. I've been with Softcrylic for a couple years now, and I focus a lot on personalization and optimization, and I, lead that practice working with a lot of clients, helping them, start the program from the ground up and enhancing their currently running programs.
It's very interesting. Could you maybe help us demystify some of the lingo and tell us the difference between personalization and optimization?
Yeah, absolutely. Those two terms are thrown around pretty much interchangeably, even though they're related but different. So you can think of optimization kind of as the baseline. That is trying to make the user experience better across, every audience, for every visitor. So those are things like, improving your overall site navigation or your mobile app design or the page layout, stuff like that. Something that would apply to pretty much everyone. Personalization kind of stacks on top of that. It's kind of like optimization for individual audiences, all the way down to the individual level. Trying to make things as relevant as possible for each user that touches your site or app. And a lot of people don't realize, or at least a lot of IT folks don't realize, is that your digital properties, they're all marketing. Absolutely everything is marketing, and all the stuff we do with personalization and optimization just kind of builds upon that marketing strategy.
That's very interesting. What sort of benefits can a personalization or optimization program provide?
Well, I mean, basically the goal is make more money. For every single client, regardless of how they make money, the goal is to make money and also improve customer satisfaction, which in turn is to make money. So it's really just a revenue generating thing. So it depends on the test and the client. So for example, for a electronics company, you might want to personalize a phone trade-in sort of program, like detecting the type of device that you're on, exactly what the value of the trade-in of that device is, and target and upsell to a new phone with the exact price that you're going to get when you trade in. So that would be a way to get more people into the trade-in flow, as opposed to just doing like a generic, hey, trade in your phone sort of thing. So the benefits are all over the map, and it completely varies by industry and by client. But ultimately you just got to be creative and think of ways, a hypothesis around what you think is going to improve the user experience to lead to more sales, more revenue, more whatever your goal metric is. And if you're on the optimization side, then test it out, see if that works. Or if it's more on the personalization side, you might already know what works and you're just trying to get more of it, trying to be more focused. There are some clients that see, orders of magnitude, lift. You could have 200 to 300% lift just in, So you can kind of see where this is going, depending on the types of things that you dedicate resources to actually testing. It could be a big moneymaker, and it could pay for the platform and the program itself. So,
well, I think you've sold me. Say I'm a client though, and I want to start one of these programs. How do I start this, and how do I get buy-in from my organization?
Always start with low-hanging fruit. If you're just starting, let's say you just purchased a tool to do it, or you're trying to evaluate a tool, and you're able to convince one of the sales guys to let you demo it as for a short period of time, then always pick low-hanging fruit. Something that's relatively easy to implement from a technical standpoint, that you have a feeling might make a big difference, and something that you can execute pretty quickly, and also has a lot of traffic. So one thing, when you're getting into this, you're dealing with statistical significance, and you want to make sure that whatever you're testing has a significant amount of traffic to be able to reach significance relatively quickly if you're trying to prove the value of it. So a really good example might be like a header navigation change. Like if you're trying to get someone to open an account, you might want to try to change, how the open account functionality is presented. So for example, if it's normally in like a sub menu or just in plain text over, over on the right side or something, you might want to try a different treatment for that as like a button or something. That would be a good, very simple, potentially high impact first test. In fact, I did a test with a bank that did that, and that was their first test, and it was the thing that sold the program to get resources to support it and ramp it up.
Wow. What sort of resources would I need to start this program?
Well, to start, you don't really need much. It really just depends on the level of technical expertise you have. Because regardless of what all the vendors, sales folks will tell you, whether how many, remember, no matter how WYSIWYG it is and how many fun things you can do just by like changing colors and whatnot, you're going to need development. You're going to need at least a basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript understanding if you're dealing with the web, in order to really do anything useful. But that being said, you don't really need, at least to start, I don't think you need like a full stack developer or anything. I mean, you need, I've been on teams where we started off our junior developers as the folks that worked in testing and optimization, working on some of the UX, implementation, inside of the tools. So you can get by without any technical resources as long as you have, some familiarity with, HTML and CSS to get by. But ultimately, you're either going to want to lean on your existing front-end developers, beg, borrow, and steal some of their time to help you out until, maybe you can get a dedicated resource on your team, to be able to help out with, with this type of work. And it really just kind of depends on your organizational structure and your model. You don't want to try to fit a square peg into a round hole. So if you're more of a matrix sort of organization and your developers are multifaceted, then maybe trying to fit the optimization or personalization program into that model would be a natural fit, because you could use portion of their time to help out with this. Whereas if you had a more traditional sort of structure, you might need a dedicated developer on your team to work side by side with, with analysts and, like a program manager to help, keep the train on the tracks, managing what's live all at once, keeping track of the metrics, report outs, stuff like that. So start small, figure out what you need, fit something that fits into your organizational structure, and build it slowly. It will pay for itself over time, as long as you're, picking things to test that are valuable and you are adhering to, good statistical, principles. So,
How would I select the first test to run?
well, I'd pick something easy. Like the header navigation test is always the first thing that I look toward. But another good thing to do is, a lot of times executives and upper management, they'll have ideas of their own. Figure out what those ideas are, implement it. That's a great way to prove the value in this sort of program. So ask around to see what people's ideas are that are floating around and execute.
It's very sage advice.
Yeah.
Now, say I have this momentum. How would I choose an optimization program or a platform?
You mean like a platform to use?
Exactly.
So I would, there's a dozen of them out there. Pick one that fits into your overall marketing stack. So, for example, if you use Adobe, which a lot of clients use Adobe Analytics, then a natural fit would be to use Adobe Target, which is their A/B testing, optimization, personalization platform, recommendations engine. It does a lot of things, but then that would be the best fit. Whereas, if you were already, if you're a Google shop, they have Google Optimize. That might be a good starting point. It's not quite as robust as some of the others out there, but it might fit very well with like your Google Analytics implementation. So first place I would look is, what are the tools you're currently using in that stack, and build off it from there and see if, that vendor's offering, ticks all the boxes that you're looking for. So.
Okay. You mentioned Adobe Target. What are the relative advantages of Adobe Target versus other platforms?
Adobe is definitely one of the most popular that we deal with. Target is one of those tools that, quite frankly, a lot of people have a license to use, but they don't use it. So it's a highly underutilized tool. And some of the advantages of it, I mean, honestly, if you're an Adobe Analytics customer, there are huge advantages because you can use analytics as the reporting source. So that way you can slice your data however you want and however you're used to looking at your Adobe Analytics, site or app data. A lot of other solutions don't really integrate that well with an existing analytics solution. And if they do, then it's kind of like a custom sort of stitching thing. And it's, it's either kludgy, it doesn't work very well, it's not very accurate, or it's just difficult to maintain. I think Adobe's integration works really well with some of their other tools. They have some pretty cool machine learning stuff for, auto targeting the best experience to a particular user based on things we know about them. It's a pretty solid tool. Their visual editor is pretty good. It allows a lot of flexibility for injecting custom code to do pretty much whatever you want. A lot of people look at it and think that it's limited when they just see the WYSIWYG, I can change colors, I can rearrange things on the page. That's great. But how does it work in like a single page app? I mean, quite frankly, you can flex that tool to work in just about any scenario. And, it's all API based too. So if you have server side use cases, like you want to personalize a kiosk, or like a, Coke freestyle machine or whatever, those are the types of use cases you can do. I think in the last summit, since it was all online, I think they had a Panera use case where they personalized the kiosk there with Target. So the sky's the limit, kind of. It's very flexible. You just got to make sure you are, going back to the resource question, you got to make sure you got the right people, both that are managing the tool from like a product management standpoint to make sure you're keeping it up to date and that the implementation is sound and that the integrations are working. And also from a day-to-day technical standpoint, that you have the right people to actually implement, various tests and, personalization tactics in the tool.
It sounds very powerful, and the integration aspect of it sounds very interesting. Would you mind elaborating on how it integrates with other products in the Adobe Experience Cloud?
Yeah, sure. A lot of it's kind of, in terms of Adobe, we do a lot with Adobe. So with Adobe, a lot of it is just controlled by the, Adobe's visitor ID service or the ECID service. That's kind of the hub that does all the stitching, to make sure that the analytics and the target calls are stitched together, that the visitor ID between all solutions is, consistent. There are other ways in the Adobe stack to get data in. You can use something called customer attributes, where you can upload like a flat CSV file of customer IDs and non-personally identifiable information about the user that you can use for targeting. So, for example, a really good use case for that I don't see enough people doing is doing your own offline modeling, like propensity scoring around, like a next best offer, next best action sort of thing, and uploading that via customer attributes and using that for targeting, on the web. I mean, that feature is free. Everyone can use it. Even the most basic license of Target gives you the ability to use at least a couple of customer attributes fields that you can use for, something like propensity scoring. So that's a big one. I mean, it takes a little bit of time, but if you have your own in-house data scientist or you work with, a company that does data science sort of work, like we do, then that's a great use case. And that's a good, simple integration. with offline data, that is really powerful. So
It sounds incredibly powerful. Uh, Based on your experience, what are some pitfalls to avoid when establishing a personalization or an optimization program?
yeah, everyone runs into these. From the ground up, one, it's staffing the wrong people, and getting off on the wrong foot. That's um, hiring the wrong kinds of resources for the work that you need to do. You want to avoid that. I mean, be open and honest about the type of people you need to make this effective. If you hire people that are not technically savvy enough to execute, you're going to be very limited in what you can do. Another thing to look out for is you got to have a statistical mindset. Everything we do here is based on statistical significance. Is it actually a lift, or was it just noise? Were there some other factors? You have to have those types of people involved when you're analyzing. I mean, a lot of the tools kind of tell you that, up front, like, hey, this has X amount of lift and this amount of, and X significance. But you can't just ignore that stuff, and you can't let the gut, let your gut instinct get the best of you. When something is losing, you have to just kind of quit. Every single test you do is a learning experience, and you have to look at it that way. You can't look at like the first test where like you do the control versus a challenger that loses. Well, not every idea that you have is going to be better than what's currently out there. So you can't get discouraged. So keeping a positive attitude around that, the whole program is about learning and optimizing, but not everything you do is going to be a winner. Having that mindset, having the right people at the helm, and having a good foundation, having a good technical foundation for it to be set up properly, so you don't have to do a bunch of hacks and workarounds just to make a test work. So I think those are probably the biggest ones. And then I guess probably more, not from like an execution and technical standpoint, but more, the organizational standpoint. You got to have buy-in on this. You can't really kind of push it from the bottom up. You need some senior leadership support and being able to, make it successful. Ultimately, you're going to need to prove the value of the program, both from like a licensing cost for the tools to help you execute, as well as any resources you need or anything like that. So, having support from leadership is almost a necessity. Um, so yeah, but if you have those things, then you can kind of evolve it over time, and it, will naturally become successful if you have all the right pieces. Just might take a little bit of time to figure out exactly how they fit together. For example, the organizational structure thing is usually a big one. How do we form this team? Where do they sit? Who do they work with? What's the reporting structure? Because the last thing you want to do is form a team that feels like they're coming in and competing with other resources or anything like that. So finding a good way to merge that in with the rest of your overall workflow, and once you do that, you're kind of off to the races. So
Well, this has been incredibly helpful. Maybe in the future we can speak again and go a little deeper on the specific capabilities of Adobe Target.
yeah, sure. Yeah, that is the one of the most popular ones. So a deep dive into that one would be fun. So
Well, I would very much look forward to it. I can't thank you enough for your time, Andrew. And we here at Softcrylic hope everyone continues to do well during these times. Thank you, Andrew.